Let's dive right into this explainer. Welcome, future CMAs, to our masterclass on internal control risk. Look, I know when you're studying for part one of the exam, some of these topics can feel, well, a little intimidating. Internal control risk in particular, it often feels super abstract. But hey, as someone who's guided tons of students through this exact material, I promise you it's actually incredibly logical. It's like a machine. Once you see the gears turning, it all makes sense. Our goal today is to take this big, complex equation and break it down into simple, bite-sized pieces. Here's our roadmap for today. We're going to start with the physics of risk, decode inherent risk, and then look at control and detection risks. After that, we'll master the inverse relationship, walk through a practice question together, and wrap the whole thing up with a final exam review. Let's get to it. Section 1, the physics of risk, and why risk cannot be entirely eliminated. So we need to start by establishing a hard truth that examiners absolutely love to test. You've really got to think of risk kind of like gravity. It's a force that's just always there. You literally cannot eliminate it entirely. You can only carefully measure it and manage it down to an acceptable level. And that brings us to the core formula, the audit risk model. Now, don't let the word audit trip you up here. This equation is the fundamental blueprint for corporate governance, and really for our entire lesson today. Audit risk equals inherent risk times control risk times detection risk. For us management accountants, this is the exact machinery we use to keep an organization safe. Moving right along to Section 2, decoding inherent risk, or risk in its natural state. Let's isolate that very first variable of our equation, inherent risk, just to understand what risk looks like in its absolute rawest form. Basically, it's the susceptibility of a process to failure, assuming there are absolutely zero internal controls in place. None. What's super interesting about this is that it's essentially the hand a company is naturally dealt. Management cannot change the fundamental nature of their industry, right? They can only respond to it. So if you're running a complex tech company, you are naturally exposed to completely different risks than a company that just sells apples. And there's a really stark contrast in these risk levels. On the high inherent risk side, you've got things like complex derivative financial instruments, cash-heavy businesses like casinos or bars, and rapidly changing tech inventory. Then over on the low side, you have standard things, prepaid insurance, heavy industrial machinery, basic office furniture. I mean, nobody's exactly sneaking a forklift into their briefcase, right? As a CMA candidate, you need to spot these instantly. If an exam question mentions a cash-heavy bar or complex international derivatives, your brain should immediately flag that as high inherent risk, no question. Section 3, control and detection risks. The defenses and the auditor's domain. Because inherent risk is literally always there, management has to build dams to hold back that flood of risk. And those dams? Those are your internal controls. Which brings us perfectly to control risk. This is the risk that a material misstatement will not be prevented or caught by the company's internal control structure. Think of this as the risk that the company's shield has a crack in it. If an organization has poor segregation of duties, a weak tone at the top, or just completely ignores basic password mandates, well, that shield is failing, which means their control risk is dangerously high. Okay, listen up, because here is a critical exam tip that trips up so many students. Let's make this crystal clear. Inherent risk and control risk exist completely independently of the auditor. When you combine them, they create what's called the risk of material misstatement, or RMM. This environment is solely owned and created by management. The auditor, they just arrive on the scene and observe what management has already built. And that brings us to the final piece of the puzzle, detection risk. This is the risk that the auditor's own procedures will somehow fail to detect an error that actually exists. Unlike those first two variables we just broke down, this final piece is entirely controlled by the auditor. You see, the auditor cannot change a company's inherent risk, and they certainly can't magically fix the control risk during the audit. That means they have to adjust their own testing, taking larger samples, digging deeper, doing way more work, based entirely on the environment that management is set up. Section 4, mastering the inverse relationship, a crucial CMA exam strategy. We're pivoting now from abstract theory straight into direct exam strategy, because we're looking at an operational dynamic the ICMA loves to test. The golden rule of thumb you absolutely must memorize is this inverse relationship. If a business has a high risk of material misstatement, meaning it's just inherently messy and has terrible internal controls, the auditor is mathematically forced to perform much more rigorous substantive testing to drive their detection risk down. High RMM requires a low detection risk strategy from the auditor. That's how you keep the overall audit safe. Section 5, practice question walkthrough. Let's apply this logic under pressure. Let's do a real CMA-style test run right now to see exactly how these mechanical gears turn in practice. Imagine an organization operates a highly decentralized division dealing exclusively in cash in a volatile foreign market, and they have a history of overriding IT security policies. Which correctly assesses inherent and control risk? Is it A, low IR, low CR, B, high IR, low CR, C, low IR, high CR, or D, high IR, high CR? When you get a scenario like this, you've got to act like a detective. You're specifically hunting for those explicit clues the examiners drop about the nature of the business and the actual behavior of the staff. So let's break this down step by step together. Step 1, analyze the nature of the business. The prompt says cash in a volatile foreign market. Now, cash is highly susceptible to theft, meaning the natural state of this business is dangerous right out of the gate. Boom, that gives us high inherent risk. Step 2, analyze the behavior. They mention a history of overriding IT security policies. If the staff is literally bypassing the controls, that shield we talked about is totally broken, giving us high control risk. By separating the natural traits of the volatile cash market from the systemic failures of bypassing IT, the logic cleanly points us straight to step 3. Select answer D, high inherent risk and high control risk. See? Once you separate those concepts, the answer just jumps right out at you. Section 6, Final Exam Review. The engine of internal control risk. Let's wrap up this explainer and lock in this highly logical framework so you are 100% ready for those test bank questions this week. Just remember our analogy. Inherent risk is the hand the company is dealt by the universe. Control risk is how well the company plays that hand with their defenses. And detection risk? That's how closely the auditor has to watch the game to make sure nothing slips by. You've absolutely mastered the equation today, but the real test is in the application. So as you head into your practice exams or even into a real corporate boardroom, how will you use this logic to spot the invisible risks before they break the machine?